When you mention the 1970s, one car that immediately comes to mind is the 1971 Plymouth GTX 440 Plus 6. This was a car that didn't just turn heads, it dominated the road. With a powerhouse under the hood, nobody could argue about its performance. But let's not get too carried away with the praise. After all, that's why we have our video today about this car. What made this car so special? What set it apart from the crowded field of muscle cars? First off, the Plymouth GTX wasn't just any muscle car. It was the high-end, premium version of the more affordable Roadrunner. Both the GTX and the Roadrunner were part of Chrysler's updated midsize lineup, which also included the Dodge Charger. But the GTX had an extra touch of class with its sleek new fuselage design. With a shorter wheelbase and a wider rear track, the GTX didn't just look great, it handled better too. And the interior? Redesigned for a more comfortable and driver-friendly experience, because what's power without control? When we think of Mopar muscle cars, big names like the Hemi-powered Charger or Challenger usually come to mind. But have you ever thought about the GTX? In today's market, where classic cars are getting harder to find and even tougher to restore, the GTX shines as a hidden gem. As Hemming's Mike Musto says, the 1971 GTX might just be one of the coolest cars ever made. So, what makes the 1971 GTX so special? First off, less than 3,000 of these cars were built, making it rarer than some of the more well-known Mopar models. And then there's the engine, a 7.2-liter V8 delivering 370 horsepower and a massive 480 pound-foot of torque. This wasn't just a car, it was a torque monster with acceleration that felt effortless. And with the 3-speed 727 transmission, you had a gearbox that wasn't just fast for its time, but is still highly regarded by drag racers today. But it's not just about looks. This GTX is factory documented with an original broadcast sheet and fender tag, proving its authenticity. It also comes with impressive features like power brakes, tinted glass, a rim-blow steering wheel, power windows, and premium saddle tan bucket seats with a folding armrest, luxuries that make it even more special. Back in the day when General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler were battling for the top spot in the muscle car wars, the Plymouth GTX stood out, offering a mix of power, style, and exclusivity. It's a reminder of a time when cars were more than just a way to get around. They were symbols of freedom, power, and individuality. So next time you think about classic muscle cars, don't just think about the usual stars. Remember the GTX, a car that was bold, powerful, and to many, absolutely beautiful. This 1971 Plymouth GTX might have been lightly optioned, but it packs a punch where it truly counts with an outstanding powertrain. Featuring a 440 cubic inch V8 engine, a robust 727 automatic transmission, and a 323 rear end, this car was built for performance. As Mike Musto from Hemming says, the 440, in my opinion, is one of the greatest engines ever made. Dodge, Plymouth, Chrysler, they put these engines in everything. They had loads and loads of torque. Paired with the durable, fast-shifting 3-speed transmission and well-rounded gear ratio, this GTX is a true performer, whether on the open highway or city streets. Inside, this GTX keeps things simple. It doesn't have the rally gauge package, which means no tachometer, but it does come with power steering and essential for smooth handling. The rest of the interior is basic, featuring only an AM radio, standard vent and heater controls, and crank windows. Despite the minimal options, the white vinyl upholstery stands out elegantly against the blue exterior and black dash. It's a classic look that complements the car's powerful presence. Musto thoroughly enjoyed his time behind the wheel of this 71 GTX, noting, "I love it. It's one of the best period correct, not over-restored muscle cars that I've driven. I wouldn't hesitate to drive it across the country." And that potent 440 V8, it brings a smile to his face every time he hits the gas. Even though Mopar was the slowest of Detroit's big three automakers to scale back engine power in the early 1970s, not all its V8 escaped unscathed. For instance, the standard 383 SID 4-barrel in the Roadrunner lost 35 horsepower. However, the GTX engines managed to hold out relatively well. The compression ratios were slightly reduced, but the standard 444-barrel and the optional 222-barrel 440 Plus 6 lost only 5 horsepower, down to 370 and 385, respectively. The extra cost, Rarely ordered 426 Hemi remains steady at 425 horsepower. Drivers could still get a 4-speed manual or Torque-Flight automatic transmission, with axle ratios up to 4.10:1, along with the iconic air grabber hood. The Plymouth GTX was designed to be the brand's true answer to the Pontiac GTO, offered as either a 2-door coupe or convertible. Standard under the hood was the powerful 7.2-liter, 440 cubic inches V8 with 375 horsepower and 480 pound-foot of torque, while the legendary 7.0-liter, 426 cubic inches Hemi V8 was available as an option, with the 446 barrel becoming an option in 1970. By the end of 1970, the Belvedere was replaced by the Plymouth Satellite, and the GTX became based on the new model, but only for one more year. The 1971 model featured the new fuselage styling, which was popular at the time, and a shorter 115-inch wheelbase. The GTX was now only offered as a hardtop coupe. Sadly, due to declining sales, the GTX was discontinued as a standalone model after the fall of 1971, marking the end of its 3 short generations over 5 years. The rarest models are those equipped with the 426 Hemi V8 and the 4-speed manual transmission. Out of the 30 Hemi-powered GTX produced, only 11 came with the manual transmission, making it a highly sought-after classic today. With its 360 horsepower and 651 newtons-meter of torque, the GTX delivered a performance that wouldn't be matched in Europe until much later, in cars that tended to weigh significantly more. It's worth noting that the power ratings were often understated at the time to satisfy insurance requirements, so the actual performance was even more impressive. This car was designed with a focus on speed and excitement rather than luxury. It was optioned just right from the factory, prioritizing performance over creature comforts. With power steering and an FM radio as the only extras, it's clear that this GTX was built for driving, not lounging. No fancy infotainment systems here, just a pure, unfiltered muscle car experience. The only factors that slightly impact the driving experience are the all-around drum brakes and a bit of play in the steering, making it slightly vague at the center. But even with these quirks, the GTX delivers an authentic, thrilling drive. When it comes to value, cars like this with the 7.2-liter, 6-barrel V8 are worth about $86,000, according to Haggerty. The 4-barrel versions are less valuable, averaging around $46,000. However, the real gem in the GTX lineup is the 7-liter Hemi version, which is much rarer and highly sought after. These models can fetch an astounding $166,000, making them some of the most valuable classic muscle cars around. That is not expensive for you if you really like this car, right? Which modern car would you compare to this one? Have you ever taken it on a road trip? Let me know about your experience in the comments below. If you stuck around till the end of the video and enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss our future content.